Greetings and welcome back. I'm going to tell you a story about a woman that I was working with who had gastric bypass, and she decided as part of her wellness plan that she was going to start running marathons. And she came to see me because she was really having some significant gastrointestinal upset. So using the nutrition assessment process, I was able to help her to narrow down the fact that given the fact she'd had gastric bypass, we were going to have to change the type and amount of carbohydrate. So in this lecture, what we're going to do is develop a step-by-step roadmap to a better eating plan. We are going to use the nutrition assessment process, just like I did with my client, to help you to be able to review your health history, evaluate your weight, your body mass index, your health status, medications, and to design a basic plan. Now keep in mind, this step-by-step guide does not replace advice from your physician or dietitian. In your guidebook, you can create your own personal nutrition plan and set your goals. Keep in mind here, our aim is to help you to personalize the nutrition information you have learned and focus in on progress, not perfection. So what is the nutrition assessment process? It is a process to help you to determine your own nutritional needs and your goals. There are 4 basic components to the nutrition assessment process, and it's ABCD. Anthropometrics. What does that mean? Anthropometrics means measuring the body. So any measurement that you would have would be considered an anthropometric measure. Biochemical, or blood or urine work. So if you have that handy, if you've had a recent physical and you have those numbers handy, that would be the biochemical portion of the nutrition assessment process. Clinical. What kind of chronic illnesses do you have? And what kind of medications do you take on a daily basis? Now keep in mind when we're talking about medications, it could be things like aspirin. It could be things like an herbal medication that you've tried. What about your multivitamin? Are you taking some vitamin D? So that's an important consideration of this nutrition assessment process. We're also looking at a dietary analysis. What do you eat on a regular basis? And again, keep in mind, the nutrition assessment process is designed to help you to set some goals and measure the progress of those goals as change over time. So now let's explore what is an anthropometric measurement. Again, it's a body measurement. And what are the common ones? Well, first and foremost, it's your height, but you have to measure it. Don't guess, and don't rely on your memory. Men tend to overestimate height. For the longest time, I was telling people that I was 5'5", and when I actually measured myself, I'm 5'4½". So I had to take that away. Your weight, measure it. And measure it in a consistent fashion. So if you routinely get up and weigh yourself without any clothes on, do that as you weigh yourself, because again, you want to be doing it in a consistent way. Women tend to underestimate their weight. So again, make sure that you're measuring these 2 very important variables. From these 2 numbers, you calculate your body mass index. Body mass index is a way of taking a look at height in relationship to weight. And so here's how you calculate it. You take your weight in pounds times 703 and divide it by height in inches squared. And what does body mass index tell us? Well, if you have a BMI of greater than 25, you are considered overweight, and greater than 30 is obese. And on the other end of the weight scale, less than 19.8 is underweight. Now keep in mind, BMI cannot tell you what kind of weight you have. So say for example, you are in the gym on a regular basis and you're strength training, you may have more lean mass that is going to raise your BMI, but you're really not over fat. You may be overweight, but you're not over fat. Keep in mind, we want to see where that weight is coming from, and does that excess weight confer any disease risk, and so we measure waist circumference. Remember, what you're trying to do is measure your waist at about the level of your belly button, and if you have a waist circumference of greater than 35 inches as a woman, greater than 40 inches as a man, you are more likely to develop prediabetes or metabolic syndrome. So it's where you have your weight. Another way of looking at it is if you're looking in the mirror, is your body type an apple, meaning that you've got more of your body fat in your upper body, or are you a pair and have more of your weight in your lower body? Now, what about body composition? Because body composition really rules the day. Check in your community to see if you have access to what is known as a bod pod. What a bod pod does is it actually measures how much of your weight, it assesses how much of your weight is lean mass and how much of your weight is actually body fat. And truly, I really prefer this as a means of assessing that BMI in a little bit more depth. Again, remember, if I'm lifting weights, I may have an elevated BMI, but I could have a low body fat. And we're trying to lower body fat and raise lean mass. So as a woman, your body fat percentage in a bod pod should be less than 30% and less than 20% for men. Another way of getting this done, if you're comfortable in the water, is underwater weighing. And both of these measures, the bod pod and underwater weighing, can give us an assessment, a peek on the inside, to say how much of my weight is fat and how much of my weight is lean. Body composition is much better than body weight. Now, some people will ask me, what about body fat scales? Well, body fat scales can be reasonably unreliable, because think about this for a second. If I stand on the scale, that scale is going to capture my lower body fat better than my upper body fat, because what it's doing is running a weak electrical current. So it almost always makes men look leaner, because men carry more of their fat in their upper body, and it always makes women appear fatter. You can get calipers done, and many personal trainers will use calipers in a gym. The problem with the calipers is it can get the fat right underneath the skin, but it can't capture the fat that's internal, deep inside, that visceral fat that confers disease risk. Now, what about biochemical assessment? Keep in mind, you have to have a physician who's going to draw blood work for you. This, again, is mostly your blood work. And what kinds of things would we be looking for as we craft this nutrition assessment plan? Well, keep in mind we're going to look at cholesterol, and you might remember that from previous lectures. You want to take a look at your iron status. So in typical blood work, you might see a hematocrit and hemoglobin, and that can give you kind of a peek as to whether or not you're anemic. Another thing that may be on your blood work is something called ferritin, and ferritin is the iron that you store that's available in times of need. Another very valuable piece of data on that blood work is something called mean corpuscular volume, oftentimes abbreviated on your blood work as MCV. And I would encourage you, when you go to your doctor, to ask for an actual copy of the lab slip, so you have this, again, as you're crafting your own plan. If the red blood cell is low, if the mean corpuscular volume, which means the size of the red blood cell, if you have small red blood cells, chances are you have an iron deficiency. If your red blood cells are large, it means that you might have a deficiency of B12 or folic acid. This next piece of data, the vitamin D status, you might really have to ask for. Physicians are getting better and better at assessing vitamin D status, but when you go in and have a physical, ask to have this done. Now, other than blood, what else can we look at? Well, your urinalysis results can take a look at, do you have any sugar in your urine? That might be, and I stress the word might be, an indication that diabetes is on your horizon. Does your urine reveal that you have ketones? And ketones are the breakdown metabolites of fat. It also can give us the urine concentration, and this is known as urine-specific gravity. The higher your urine-specific gravity, the more likely you are to be dehydrated. So again, the more concentrated or dark your urine is, the more dehydrated you are, and urine-specific gravity is a urine test that physicians perform to see how dry or dehydrated you are. As we go on to clinical assessment, again, this is what makes you really you. It includes any chronic illnesses that you might have, and think that if you have a chronic illness, say for example you have diabetes, or you're taking any medications, this is a real key part of the clinical assessment portion of the nutrition assessment process. Chronic illnesses oftentimes require some kind of dietary modification, so it's also going to alter the analysis of your diet. It may cause nutrient holes that might need to be filled or avoided. So say, for example, you cannot drink milk. You don't like it, you don't tolerate it. Well, now I've created a possible nutrient hole, calcium, vitamin D, that I might have to fill with a supplement or with a different food. So another example might be diabetes, heart disease, or cancer. What about any kind of gastrointestinal disease that you might have? That might include celiac disease or Crohn's disease. These diseases require significant modification and oftentimes pharmaceuticals to help to control the disease process. Medications can cause significant interactions and alter nutritional status and must be taken into account when crafting a nutritional plan. So these are medications, again, that you would use on a chronic basis, not the fact that you would take something like Motrin for a headache. The most common nutrient-drug interaction, or one that probably causes Americans the most grief in the long run, is grapefruit juice. Grapefruit juice interacts indirectly with over 50% of the commonly used medications. So you would know grapefruit juice is a very nutritious food. If it's pink grapefruit juice, it's got a little red pigment, a little lycopene in it. You think this is a great thing to have with my breakfast in the morning. The problem is the juice inhibits an enzyme that degrades some of the drug that you might be taking in your intestinal tract. Without the enzyme, and the enzyme is CYP3A4, more medication reaches the blood than is desired. And about 14% of the population drinks grapefruit juice weekly. So keep in mind there are food and drug interactions out there, and again, the ones that we're most concerned about are going to be the ones that you take chronically. So if we're looking at grapefruit juice, what drugs are affected? Well, if you have epilepsy, medication for epilepsy can be affected, antidepressants, calcium channel blockers that are oftentimes used in heart disease, statin resins, drugs that lower your cholesterol, and the effect can last up to 72 hours after you had your 4 ounces of grapefruit juice in the morning. There are also medications that can cause an increase in blood sugar, and this is so important that if say for example on your regular physical, that your sugar in your urine was a little high, you might want to make sure that you inform your physician, oh, by the way, there may be some medications that I'm taking that raise my blood sugar and again increase the amount of sugar in my urine. So what medications can cause an increase in blood sugar? A classification of drugs called atypical antipsychotics can cause an elevation in blood sugar. Niacin, which is a B vitamin, but when used in high enough doses for cholesterol, can raise your blood sugar. Medications can also alter your own individual nutritional status. Metformin, which is a very, very common drug for the treatment of diabetes, can actually decrease vitamin B12. So again, if you are on metformin, this would cue you in when you go to your physician, ask and just say, have you checked my vitamin B12 status? I'm a little bit concerned about this interaction. And keep in mind, your pharmacist can be a great partner with this. If you're taking methotrexate for rheumatoid arthritis, that can alter folic acid status. And certainly over-the-counter medications and herbal medications can also affect nutritional status. Very, very popular herb, something called Chinese red yeast extract, can lower cholesterol in a similar fashion as the statin resins. Fish oil can lower triglycerides. And so medications and chronic illnesses really play a big part in the nutrition assessment process. So what about the D in nutrition assessment? Well, the D stands for dietary assessment. Now, this is where you have to be very realistic. How does your diet stack up? Again, remember, our goal here is always progress, not perfection. So I will declare openly my favorite food in the world is chocolate. So I have no problem saying that might be the thing in my diet that might be a weakness for me. But you can rate your own plate. 50% of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. 1/4 should be some source of lean protein, and remember, a lean protein could be beans, it doesn't have to be meat, and 1/4 should be a whole grain. Well, there are some great websites out there, and one of my favorite is a website called Rate Your Plate by the University of Connecticut Team Nutrition. It's interactive, it has pull-down menus, It has interactive ways of designing your own plate. It's a very wonderful tool. There are also interactive nutrition and physical activity monitoring systems. Again, one of my favorite is something called fitday.com. And it's a website where you log in your food intake and your exercise to see how you're progressing. So what you're actually doing is evaluating your nutritional status and your progress as you try and make dietary changes. Keep in mind, dietary changes are difficult for most of us to make because we have habits, we have preferences, and so again, keep in mind we're looking at progress, not perfection. However, the key to understanding any online program is you have to understand portion sizes, because any online program is going to ask you what was your serving size or what was your portion size. So if your portion size is incorrect, your assessment of calories and protein is also incorrect. So can you eyeball portions? Well, a half a cup is about the size of the palm of your hand. Now I realize not all of us are the same size, and a very large man versus a petite woman, the palm of the hand is going to be different. But as a crude estimate, a half a cup is about the size of the palm of your hand. So if you had pasta last night and it covered your plate, that is not a half a cup portion, that's probably a 2-cup portion. 3 ounces of meat is about the size of a deck of cards, and I like that as an analogy because it also gives us depth. An ounce of cheese is about the size of a domino. I want you to think about that for a second. Cheese is a very high-fat protein, about 100 calories per ounce. So if you have 6 ounces of cheese and crackers, you had 600 calories of cheese. A half a cup of rice or potatoes, ice cream, kind of a sticky or a creamy food, is about the size of a tennis ball. So if you get out a big cereal bowl and have ice cream at night, that is not a half a cup portion. Now, what about websites to help you to count calories? Well, there is CalorieKing.com and others that can help you to determine the calories in the foods you eat. And I think that's a really great thing to do because Calorie King and a lot of the calorie counting websites can actually help you to look at fast foods or favorite restaurants that you might frequent as well. Now, what about alcohol intake? Alcohol and other liquids can oftentimes be overlooked as a source of energy. We tend to remember what we eat, not so much what we drink. So as little as 2 regular beers per day would add up to 2,100 calories per week. And if you're trying to lose weight, there's 3,500 calories in a pound, so those liquid beverages can make a big deal in your overall nutrition assessment plan. Well, can you do a more in-depth analysis of your needs? Well, let's take a look at calorie needs. First and foremost, we have to calculate ideal body weight. And I'm going to remind you, there's an equation out there that we've talked about before called the Hamwe equation, but let's review it. It allows 100 pounds for the first 5 feet of height for women and 5 pounds for each inch after. Men get a little bit more weight for the first 5 feet of height, and it's 106 pounds for the first 5 feet and 6 pounds for each inch after. The value of this is once you take your ideal body weight, so again, if I'm 5'4", I'm going to round down here. If I'm 5'4", my ideal body weight is 120, and 120 times 10 gives me the calories that are needed for my basal metabolic rate. So that gives me my BMR calories. To that, I can add up to 30% additional calories if I'm sedentary, 50% if I'm moderate, and 100% if I'm active. The problem is most people confuse being busy with activity. So to be moderately active, for example, I would have to have some activity in my daily life, like am I a nurse in a hospital? And then I would have to get regular exercise outside of that. So unfortunately, in our lifestyle today, pretty high percentage of us actually are sedentary. So again, let's use that example of a woman who's 5'4" and moderately active. Her ideal body weight would be 120. 120 times 10 is 1,200. If she's moderately active, she can add up to 50% of those BMR calories, which is 600, and her total energy needs would be 1,800 calories. Now keep in mind, she could be consuming more energy than that, and that slight increase in energy can cause weight gain, maybe not instantly, but over a period of time. So I'll give you an example. If she requires 1,800 calories a day and just eats 1,900 calories a day, she'll gain 10 pounds in a year. And quite honestly, that's the way most Americans gain weight. It's what I call the insidious weight creep. All of a sudden your clothes are a little bit tight, we blame the manufacturer. It wasn't the manufacturer. We have these increasing calories that are creeping up. Now what about a man? A man who is 5'10" and sedentary, ideal body weight's 166. 166 times 10 is 1660. If he's sedentary, he only gets to add 30%. So 30% would give him a total energy need of 2158. Again, remember, if you're trying to lose weight, you got to cut between 500 and 1,000 calories per day. Now, what about if you're underweight and you need to gain? Well, it's the reverse. You would add 500 to 1,000 calories per day. Now, what about protein intake? Protein intake, a little bit more difficult, so you might want to get out a calculator and a piece of paper and a pen. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. It's not based on what you weigh, it's based on what you should weigh. Because again, remember, protein is needed to build and repair lean body mass. So this 120-pound woman, ideal body weight's 120. And to go from pounds to kilos, you divide by 2.2, and that'll give you 54.5 kilos. 54.5 times 0.8 gives her a total protein need of 43, rounded up to 44 grams of protein per day. Honestly, that's very easy to get in a traditional American diet. So let's use our male example as well. He's 5'10", ideal body weight's 166. I got to get that to kilos. I divide by 2.2, and he's 75 kilos. 75 times 0.8 is 60 grams. And again, very easily met by most dietary plans. An exception to that might be if you're a vegan. So if we're using our deck of cards, 3 ounces of meat, size of a deck of cards, is equal to 21 grams of protein. So a serving of meat, for our female example, is almost half of the protein that she needs per day. And that's, again, very easy to get in an American diet. So most of us, as typical Americans, if you're a carnivore, chances are you overconsume rather than underconsume protein. Now, what if you have an older person in your life? Are there any tools out there? Or if you're a senior yourself and you're concerned about your dietary requirements, I would encourage you to consult what is called the Determine Questionnaire on the website of the American Academy of Family Physicians. It's an easy-to-use, validated screening tool designed to determine nutritional risk in older individuals. So what it would do, would ask some questions about diet. It's self-administered. It would ask some questions about diet, and that would be the D portion. So for example, it might ask the question, how many meals do you eat per day? And if you eat two or less meals per day, you're going to increase your nutritional risk. It would ask about weight loss. Have you lost weight in the last 6 months? Not as part of a purposeful weight loss plan. So again, it's a great validated tool, and again, you can find it on that particular website. The goals of nutrition assessment are to provide you a baseline requirement of nutritional needs, tolerances, limitations, and the ability to calculate basic nutrition needs. So let's try and pull all this together with an example. We have a woman, she's 5'4", and she currently weighs 180. Okay, so you're thinking in the back of your mind, 180 is probably not her ideal body weight, so let me figure this out. She should weigh 120. So that would tell you from the beginning she's got about 60 pounds to lose. She's sedentary with high blood pressure. She doesn't drink any alcohol, but she drinks black tea. Calorie needs to maintain her weight would be ideal body weight times 10, 1,200. She's sedentary, so we add a third, somewhere in the range of 1,500 to 1,600 calories per day. To lose weight and to do an effective nutrition assessment, she would need to do the following. We would want her to measure her waist circumference to check her risk of prediabetes. With the approval of her physician, we might want her to walk 3 miles a day to burn about 300 calories. And why is that the case? Her calories are already reasonably low to maintain her weight. And so one of the strategies would be if I can get her to move, I don't have to restrict her food quite as much. So she could walk 3 miles per day to burn 300 calories, and I would want her to reduce her energy intake by about 200 calories per day to reach the 500 calorie per day goal that we're looking for. Because she's hypertensive, we would want her to include the principles of the DASH diet to help to control her blood pressure. More fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy. She also is going to need to review her medications with her pharmacist to make sure her high blood pressure medication does not cause her to lose potassium or to cause her blood sugar to be elevated. So again, that's a quick example of what she could do to say, I'm going to pull all of this together, I'm going to tie it up in a nice bow, and I'm going to have, again, a little bit more of a nutrition action plan. I think the challenge is for most Americans who are sedentary, they're not going to be satisfied with just reducing calories alone because bottom line is you're going to be hungry. The other challenge here, and it's a real challenge, is that most Americans are relatively impatient with weight loss. So if we restrict her by 500 calories a day, she's not going to have a 10-pound per week weight loss. And again, most Americans will say, gee, I was on a diet for a week and I only lost a pound. And rather than feel depressed, I would say you need to cheer because the chances are you created a plan that you can live with because what we're looking again for is progress, not perfection. So let's come up with an example for a man. He's 5'8", weighs 200 pounds. But he is moderately active. Maybe he has a job as a lineman for a utility company, and he goes out and exercises, plays handball with his buddies a couple times a week. But that waist circumference, he's gotten out his tape measure, he's got a 44-inch waist, and he's been diagnosed as pre-diabetic. He drinks 1 beer every single evening, and when he actually critically evaluates his diet, he's taking in 2 teaspoons of sugar in his coffee, and he has 3 cups a day. The calorie needs to maintain his weight would be about 1540. He's moderately active, so he can add half of that to his total to figure out his total daily calorie intake at about 2,300 calories per day. But to lose weight, he would need to do the following. Walk or work out at a gym 1 hour, 5 days a week. So maybe I want him to ramp up his activity, and then he would have an additional 400 calorie loss each day, which would total about 2,000 calories for the week. And I want him to reduce his energy intake by about 250 calories per day to total a loss of 1,750 per week. So 250 calories cut out of a diet really isn't that difficult to do. He could reduce his alcohol intake to maybe 1 beer per week and save 900 calories per week. But again, all of us are going to have our own individual preferences. Maybe that's not where he wants to save calories. Maybe there's something else he could do in his diet. For example, maybe he would change from eating red meat to chicken and save some calories that way. Well, another strategy that he could try is to use a sugar substitute in his coffee, which would save 36 calories per cup, 3 cups per day, every day. He could save 750 calories per week by doing that. Again, because of his waist circumference, we might be looking for a low-fat, low-calorie diet for him, and a Mediterranean diet plan would be a good fit. So when we add up all the numbers, 2,000 calories lost here, 1,750 here, 900, 750, he would lose about 5,400 calories per week and lose weight at about a rate of 1.5 pounds per week. Now, again, he might want to consult a registered dietitian to make sure he's on the right path for dealing with his pre-diabetic condition. He's going to need to review his medications with his pharmacist to avoid food and drug interactions. And ideally, this is the kind of patient I really love to work with because he's on the verge of a disease. And if we can prevent that disease from actually manifesting itself, now he's in a wonderful position to prevent diabetes and prevent some of the consequences associated with diabetes. Okay, what about our frequently asked questions? I try to eat right and prepare good meals at home, but it's my children and my husband that eat out at lunch. And how can I know if they make poor nutrition choices? Do we have any advice for that? Well, become a fruit and vegetable detective. If you're worried about your children eating well at school, you may want to involve them, for example, in preparing their lunch. Or if they eat a school lunch, what you may want to do is actually print off or take a look at the nutrition information online from your school district and help them to pre-choose before they go. You can also become a fruit and vegetable detective. Almost every type of restaurant and fast food outlet has fruits and vegetables, if you look. Problem is, when we go into a fast food restaurant, we don't look at the menu. We oftentimes choose by number, and then we supersize it. So what we're actually going to do is just encourage people, if they eat out at a fast food restaurant, not to supersize and avoid sweet liquid calories. In my experience, the average supersized meal is going to be about 2,000 calories. Keep that in mind. We just went through all those calculations. You go and have one fast food meal that you've supersized, and that would be more calories than I could eat for the entire day. Another frequently asked question: I work very long hours, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day. How can I incorporate a good nutrition plan into such a lifestyle? And actually, when you're doing your dietary analysis as part of this nutrition assessment process, when you get to diet, critically look at your barriers. We all have them. And so a barrier for someone who works very long hours is they're going to probably need to plan their food, take a little bit of time on a Sunday evening, pack up some food, stock a refrigerator at work with yogurt, fruits, and vegetables. And what I usually will say is, you know what, good nutrition just doesn't happen. For very busy and active lifestyles, you actually have to put some forethought into it. So again, plan your food, and it's as easy as just packing some extra fruits and vegetables. Another frequently asked question: wow, portion sizes are so much smaller than I thought. This is one of the reasons, and in my experience, one of the driving factors on how individuals don't assess their diet in a reasonable fashion. Keep in mind that 50 years ago, people ate dessert, they ate fried foods, but the portions were smaller. So the challenge always is, aren't I going to be hungry all the time if I follow any kind of nutrition plan? Well, no, not really, because your calorie needs might be high enough that you would need multiple servings, for example, of a bread at a meal. So you might need more breads and cereals in the half a cup portion. More calorie need, the greater your portion sizes. But again, a single portion for a starch, for example, like rice, is about the size of the palm of your hand. Another frequently asked question is, can a nutrition plan be used for children? Don't they have special needs like that adults don't? And yes, children need more calories than adults per pound of body weight. The challenge is children have a smaller body weight. So calories per pound are higher, but total energy needs are not. Children need a variety of food, and what is unique here is that children usually have increased appetite during growth spurts. Parents and grandparents should not attempt to control children's calories or to count them. But what you can do is stress lean meats, low-fat dairy, and fruits and vegetables. And again, remember, children have this wonderful gift. We're all born with the ability to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full. So please don't try and aggressively control your children or grandchildren's diet. Thank you very much.